The first time I saw her, she was standing on the balcony of the Crystal Hall, the great spires of her homeworld rising behind her in shimmering blue light, while the twin suns sank into the horizon and poured molten gold across her hair. She was the Princess of Aravane, the one all worlds whispered about, a figure draped in both grace and destiny. Yet that day she was not looking toward the gathered nobility nor the hovering warships above, but at the tall stranger beside her. He spoke, and she laughed, her laughter like the chime of rare stones struck in harmony. And I felt something shift deep inside me, a pull that stretched across the great void between our lives. I was just a human envoy from a backwater world, carrying the weight of my people's hope for trade and peace. Yet in that moment the galaxy narrowed to her and the sound of her joy. The days that followed were a blur of ceremonial greetings and endless feasts where her people displayed their rare beasts, their drifting gardens and their singers whose voices could make starlight tremble. I moved through it all like a shadow, keeping my place among the minor guests, and never letting my eyes linger too long on her. Yet she was everywhere in my mind. When she entered a hall, the air bent toward her when she walked the floor. The alien silk of her gown caught the glow from every jewel in the ceiling. She smiled often, yet it was never at me, not truly. And then I saw it again one evening on the Terrace of Winds. She was with him, a noble from the border systems, tall, broad, and glittering in the armor of his house. They stood close, speaking in low tones. And then she laughed again, a sound like life itself. And I felt the cold truth settle into me that my love was not a claim to make, but a fire to carry, even if it burned alone. I began to notice how she leaned into him when they spoke, how his hand brushed hers in passing, how her gaze softened when she thought no one was watching. It was not jealousy that rose in me, but something quieter and heavier, a recognition that her joy was not mine to control. My duties as envoy kept me moving through the lower chambers of the hall, meeting ministers who spoke of metals and fuel routes. Yet my thoughts wandered toward her across the vast bridges of the palace. I told myself I was foolish. I was a visitor soon to be gone, back to a ship that would carry me to a world of oceans and rain and cities that would never see her light. But every glance I stole, every breath I caught from her presence, told me I would carry her smile with me longer than any treaty. The night of the solstice banquet came with its rivers of stardust wine and towers of fruit from worlds I could not name. Music rose like a living thing around us. The floor glowed beneath our feet. The banners of every allied world hung high from silver beams. I watched her from the far edge of the hall. She wore a crown of crystal that caught each flicker of light and scattered it into the eyes of all who dared look. Yet even then, she found him in the crowd. He approached her with a bow of his head. She reached for his hand, and they stepped into the center, where dancers moved in spirals older than human history, and the two of them began to move together as if the galaxy itself had been written. For this moment, her laughter rose again, carried on the music like a ribbon of light. And I felt both the ache of loss and the warmth of knowing she was happy. When the last day of my mission came, I walked the gardens alone, the alien air thick with the scent of silverleaf and the soft rustle of wind through the glowing vines. I passed the place where I had first spoken to her, a brief exchange about the storms over my world, a passing kindness from her to a stranger. I thought of how little I truly knew her, and yet how much she had given me. Without meaning to, I saw them in the distance, walking together along the mirrored pools, his hand at her back, her head turned toward him as she laughed once more. The sound reaching me like a faint echo across a canyon. I stood there for a long moment, and then turned away. I carried no bitterness, only the strange peace that came when love was stripped of wanting. My ship left the Aravane skies at dawn, the twin suns spilling light over the horizon as the world fell away beneath us. The stars opened above, sharp and endless, and I thought of her standing there somewhere in that palace, her life unfolding in ways I would never see. perhaps she would never think of me again. Yet my heart knew the truth. I would think of her always, through every star I crossed, every barren rock and gleaming city I touched. Her laughter would follow me like a trail of light. I would love her across the cold spaces between galaxies. Not to hold her, not to change her path, but simply because some loves are made to endure without ever needing to arrive.